Hey there, this is That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Tuesday, July 28th of 2020, and I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson, and I have the hiccups right now, so this will be a fun episode to do. Joining me this week is the king of irrelevant jokes, Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
Hanging in there. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing. Again, it's a nice Tuesday in Austin. The past few days actually have been pretty all right weather. Sunday was pretty nice, and then Monday and today have each been really nice as well. So yeah, I'm doing all right.
And that was a good point though too, because it was really nice over the weekend. I definitely got some enjoyment out of the pool.
Yeah, I went on a few walks. It was beautiful. But alas, we are not here to talk about Austin's weather. Instead, we're here to talk about a general idea summed up best by a piece by Christopher Dring. I would pronounce it if it's wrong, let me know, but I'm saying Christopher Dring from GamesIndustry.biz called "The Console War is Over." And as Christopher goes over in this excellent opinion piece, and as we discussed during our post-show for Xbox, I believe last week during the State of Play recap, with each console maker going in such radically different directions, are the days of the console wars truly well and over? And, more importantly, what do we think of the long-term ramifications of the series of decisions and strategies will be over the course of the next generation to come for Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo each? How smart are their approaches? How successful do you think they will be? And ultimately, who do we think will fare best? Frank, let's start with you. What do you think of the console wars status and also these game companies' decisions and strategies going into the next generation of consoles?
Yeah, because I definitely very much agree with the article and a lot of the points laid out. Even before reading it, I was just kind of I was definitely.
I'm already down. Yeah,
exactly. I'm already kind of on that page or on that wavelength, and then kind of seeing the article and then reading it, I was definitely yep, I agree with all this, and. I think it's a good thing, honestly. And I think it's interesting to see, because I definitely remember for, I guess, the entire rest of my life, it's always been this competition, and it's even been people online arguing with each other, people in the magazines, and then even just the actual console makers arguing with each other. And that's why E3 was even so awesome, because you kind of get these big showcases, and it was almost kind of like this metaphorical boxing match, especially that one year from Sony when they just kind of went after
they went berserk. Yeah, I think it's interesting for me because, again, as we kind of touched on in the State of the Play kind of recap, Microsoft is very much doing their own thing now. They're not trying to be Sony 2.0. They're not trying to copy even really Nintendo. They're very much carving out their own space within games. And Nintendo, again, to go back to the reference I used last week, has just been the kid in the corner coloring on the walls, having a blast, just living its own life for years now. I mean, arguably for 2 or 3 console generations, right? Since the Wii, arguably.
I was going to say, I think the GameCube was the last time they ever tried to fight that front.
Right?
And then...
Yeah, and so it's really interesting, I think, to see, if how successful this all can be, if there is just Sony's the one who's just going to kind of do the classic console approach and obviously evolve it and do their own twist in it, but kind of that lane. Nintendo being Nintendo, doing Nintendo things and not really caring as much about giant AAA third-party games coming on its platform, just worrying about indies and Nintendo properties, the 4 franchises it has that everybody loves. And then Microsoft, kind of the utilization, I think, of the PC side of things, trying to build up its own roster for party games, and then really doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on Games Pass as a platform going forward. And I think it could be easy to take for granted how seemingly regular this is, but I mean, even within, like you said, the entirety of our lifetimes, this has not been the case. It has been a blood sport. These are all kind of going for a small pool of people. And so it's really interesting to see that change, right? Whether it's Nintendo or Sega, or Microsoft and Xbox, or Microsoft and Sony for 4 generations now, like this is not the normal way that games work. And like, what do you think? I guess, what do you think of each company's strategies, and how successful do you think they will be in this coming generation?
Yeah, like I think I guess just starting off with Sony, like
Let's pick on them first. Yeah.
I think they'll probably still be very successful. I definitely hope they will be, but I think honestly they have like they're going with the strategy that I think is the most of like what we typically have seen and like would
Yeah.
expect. But
Yeah.
there's nothing really, I don't think for them there's nothing really like wrong with that, especially because I even double checked before we got on.
Yeah.
And when you look up the top five best selling consoles of
Yep.
all time,
Yep.
all four Sonys are in the top five. Like at
Yep.
this point, Sony, I'm not trying to sound like a fanboy, but at this point, Sony's been winning this game for like a really long
Yeah.
time, since day one, basically. Um, and I think they're definitely sticking to some of their laurels, especially with what really helped them kind of get back on top with the
Mhm.
PS4. And I think they're really just going to keep trying to move that momentum forward. And I thought the interesting quote from the article too was that like Jim Ryan was saying like they want to make this transition for like the most people transition from 4 to 5 than they like ever have. Like they want those units to just like fly off the shelves and get everybody who's like a PS4
Mhm.
person on PS5, and then probably sell even more in the long run. Um, I hope that works out for them. Like I definitely have faith because I think they're on a hot streak right now, and I just hope they can definitely keep that going. This is definitely better than the last time saw them come off a hot streak and then go into their next console with like too much hubris.
I think it's interesting from a Sony perspective, because you took the kind of big plot point I was going to go with for Sony, where it's like, I mean, it's not even if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's been wildly successful. It's not even close to being broke, right? Like every single one of their 4 consoles has sold over 85 million units. And as you mentioned, all 4 of them are in the top 5 best-selling video game consoles of all time. They have the top 3 best-selling of all time. The PlayStation 4 has sold over 110 million units, which is the current console, obviously, and is the second best-selling video game console of all time. And then the PlayStation 2, I think the ubiquitous of that console, that generation, dominated in a way like no other console has dominated a generation. To say nothing of the fact that as wildly successful as the PS4 has been, it is still 45 million units behind the PC. Like the PC was such a dominant presence. Like from Sony's point of view, they have no reason to try to change it. Like only one of their 4 consoles has sold under 100 million units, right? Like for them, it's a thing of like, we've been very successful. We were humbled during the PS3, still ended up selling 87 million consoles. But the PS4, we righted the ship. We've done things right, and now it's the second best-selling console of all time and wildly successful, like 60 million units ahead of, Xbox. Like, why would we want to really change things up too radically? Like, to me, it makes sense that they're going to be the one who is like, yeah, like, we've won, right? Like, I think worst case for Sony, you could argue they lost 1 generation, right? Like the PS3 360 one. Otherwise, they've won 3 of the 4 they've been a part of. So I just don't think that it makes. Yeah, I mean, to them, I just wonder. It must seem like Xbox is just trying to do anything they can to get back in the race, right? And I think when we're gonna kind of critique and rate all of these at the end of the episode, and I think Sony's the one who is gonna do the least different, but also they have the least incentive to do anything different because it's been wildly successful, right? Like I think you'd agree with that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, and I think it'll be interesting to see how they're definitely starting the generation in a very traditional method, and I'm just kind of interested to
Yeah,
see how that obviously works. And then yeah,
evolves.
and like
Yeah.
evolves because I wonder, like they do have their own subscription service, and they're at the point
Yeah.
where they are putting exclusives in there. It's just like a year or two after they come out, as opposed to like
Mm-hmm.
Xbox, which is like day one, get everything on Game Pass. But I wonder, I think they are going to try to do more with that subscription service, especially as Game Pass continues to
This is what
like.
I was gonna ask you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because like Game Pass is super successful. It has like 10 million subscribers, and I
Yeah.
only assume it's going to keep going higher. Like it's a great service. Like if I was
Yeah.
in the Xbox ecosystem, I'd be all about that. And I think so that is one of the things Sony's looking at, because even before that really blew up, Sony did have one of the most successful subscription services with their version of like PS Now.
Yeah.
So now
Yeah.
Microsoft is kind of taking their lunch on that, and I don't think they're just going
Hmm.
to sit there and take that. But I also think they know probably now's not the right time to like fight that fight. They're probably going to maybe pivot a little bit in the generation and maybe work towards that, especially if it turns out to be super successful for Microsoft.
I think for me too is the idea that I think Sony is a company who always wants to be the best at everything they do, and I think like you said Games Pass is way beyond anything Sony has done now in terms of that area. And I think they're definitely looking at that being like, all right, not this year or even next year, but 3 or 4 years down the road, what do we have that can match and then better what Games Pass is in terms of like deals, in terms of offers? And I think anybody who thinks Sony is not in some sort of like underground layer right now, crafting their response to Games Pass is just absolutely silly. Like they're very much they want to dominate every aspect of what they're doing in the games market, and so I'm super excited to see what their version of Games Pass looks like what it would entail, when, like how far into the generation it would come out. Like, there's a lot that I'm really curious about, and as much as we've talked about, I think Sony deservedly so being the guys who are kind of the front runner for the next generation. I am curious if things kind of stumble, right, like maybe their price is really high. I don't see a scenario where it's above $500, but like let's say it is, God forbid, $600, something like that, and they just make a series of like PR blunders and they kind of fall behind the generation to start with. Yeah, like maybe they speed up their own version of Game Pass, and I'm curious to see almost what Sony continues to kind of do in response to Xbox, because they're the ones with PlayStation who are very clearly kind of in the position of power. And so I'm interested to see what they kind of do to keep warding off the challenger they have in Microsoft.
And that's why I think it's like it's interesting to see Microsoft try to go with like the Games Pass route, because I think they kind of definitely
Yeah.
realize like we are probably not going to beat them on hardware, and kind of going back to like they've sold the most hardware out of any game console manufacturer ever. And I guess maybe if you totaled up them and all of Nintendo across all time, maybe it doesn't line up. But I just mean like they're in the top four out of the best selling consoles are the four PlayStations, and if the PS5 blows up, they could have
Yeah.
the entire top five. Um, and
Yeah. That's definitely
yeah,
possible.
because like the Wii is over 100 million, but like if
Yeah.
they well, I guess that would just push the PS3 out. But I mean, like they, I
Yeah.
just think like they probably realize like they can't probably win the hardware battleground, and then they're really just like looking at these alternatives. But I think they have a very creative solution, which is like multi-staged, because I think it starts with Game Pass and getting as many people in as you can, and then I think they're really
Mm-hmm.
going for like that what Stadia was trying to pitch, where it's like you just pick up a device and
Yeah.
you hit play,
Yeah.
and you got your whole library, you got all your games, and like I have more faith in Phil Spencer and Microsoft to make that happen than I do
Mm.
with Google.
Mm.
So
Mm.
and I'm
Yeah.
and at
Absolutely.
this point, I think Google's definitely probably like backing away from everything they were doing, even though they put in this entire infrastructure.
It's Google. It's like 15 million of different Google products that got like a really buzzy like launch window thing, and then like they just go like, all right, it's not working out, and we're just gonna leave because we don't really care because we're Google and we have a gazillion dollars, so like it's whatever to us.
Yeah, they're like we're it's like a toy or whatever. They're like we're bored with this, like.
Yeah, it's very much feels like that. Yeah.
And I mean, and that's not even the first time we've seen somebody try to bite off like a part of the video game space, but it's just like
No, not
you
at
have to
all.
go about it the right way, and it does take a ton of money. And like you saw Microsoft.
And time.
Yeah, because it's like you saw Microsoft buy in and start it like generations ago, but I feel like it
Mm-hmm.
took a while. Like it takes a long time to actually build up like an audience and build up like a lot of the things. And then now you're seeing like the whole traditional market totally shift. So I think it'll be interesting
Mm-hmm.
to see them
Mm-hmm.
go with the Games Pass route. And I think it's going to be incredibly successful. I just think it's going to be one of those things which they're expecting, where it's like, yeah, they're not going to move a lot of units, but they're going to sell a lot of subscriptions, especially the more devices they get it on. Because xCloud, when as that kind of comes out, and is then going to be like the backing force behind Game Pass. They're trying to get to the point where it's like pick up your smartphone and play Halo Infinite right now. Like,
So I have two questions for you, and I'm kind of combining Microsoft and Sony into this. And the first one is Microsoft related, which is, yeah, how successful do you think Microsoft is the next generation, focusing on, it seems like, this Games Pass first subscription based service model that they're kind of pursuing? And then second, tying into that, is a thing that we haven't really considered yet for Sony, which is how much does Sony invest and push forward PSVR? Like, those two are my big questions to you.
no, yeah, those are good questions. And for the Microsoft one, I think Game Pass is going to be incredibly successful for them. They have 10 million subscribers now. I don't think that's going to drop very much. I think that if anything, that's just going to continue to go up. Especially because
Yeah, I
it is
agree.
on PC and it is on phone and it is going to be on phones. It's like it's going to be on as much as they can possibly get it on. Um, and I think so. I could definitely see them going over 15 million or maybe even 20 million subscribers in the next generation, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds kind of crazy, but they could even probably go higher too, depending. I mean, honestly, ideally, I think I know Nintendo and Sony won't let this happen, but I think honestly, even Phil Spencer would put Games Pass like on something like Switch or like on PS4 or whatever. Like, I honestly even like I think they would, but I definitely don't think the other companies are probably, would probably stop that. There's some kind of a limit. But like, I think that they're going to continue to try to blow that up as much as they can. And I feel like almost the Xbox brand is then going to be somehow almost like not entirely replaced, but it's going to become
Mm-hmm.
Game Pass. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like hardware sales, I honestly don't know how well their units are going to sell, especially if they have these two variations, and even kind of including the lower end one and the higher end one together. I honestly don't even know if they're going to hit the numbers of like the Xbox One, and like what that has managed to sell, which they're not given like firm numbers, but we estimate to be like 40 million maybe, somewhere in the 40s. And like, I don't even know if they're going to be able to hit that this time, especially if it does end up being like an expensive unit which is super crazy powerful. Because honestly, I wonder like how many people actually want like in terms of consoles. Like, well, I guess a lot of people want the most powerful thing, but I feel like you're really just getting into like splitting hairs at that point between like the Series X and like the PS5.
I think. No, I'll save that. That's gonna be my last question this episode. So yeah, we'll focus on, yeah. What do you think Sony does with the PSVR then?
Yeah, so so with the PSVR, I think that's a good question, and I think with
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're really going to push it too hard. Like, I feel like they're still going to be
Is
investing
this
in
Vita
software. Like, we just
2.0?
saw Iron Man. It Yeah, but even like I think they're definitely going to support it more. Like, I think they're just going to keep probably putting some exclusives in it or licensing other people's games and getting from like
Mm-hmm.
VR PC exclusives and bringing those over. But I don't know if they're going to do like VR too. Like, that's what I would really want is them to do like a hardware refresh. And honestly, where we're at with VR
I think.
technology, it might raise the price a little bit, but it would be awesome to see the wireless version, kind of like the Quest, where like even if you
This.
have to
Yeah.
plug like
Yeah.
the dock into your PlayStation, you don't have to run any wires to
I
like
think what I
you.
see them doing with VR, honestly, Frank, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is almost what they did with like the PlayStation Pro, where it's like I wonder if like halfway through this new console generation, they come out with here's PSVR 2.0 basically, and here it is like, so they wait like 3 or 4 more years that way can maybe like have the price be like still pretty low-ish on it. Like, it's a brand new PSVR unit. It's wireless. It's like crazy future tech compared to where we are now, whatever. And they launch it then and kind of really put a push behind it, and it's even more of like an actual like this is a thing you can play video games on. Like, it's not just like a gimmick. Like, they really commit to it, and I feel like they do that like mid generation, like 3 years into the PS5's lifespan. They do something like that, because then they feel comfortable with like where the PS5 is at. And this is like a second wind push on it, and it comes out like it's a PSVR 2 bundle along with like the PS5 like slim kind of like bundle to like package together or whatever. Like, that's what I think I see them doing.
No, I think you're right. Like, I think if they are going to do it, I think that it's pretty much what is going to happen, or that's going to be the strategy, where it is going to be like midway through the generation, and then I could see that being paired with like a slim or like a pro version of the PS5. But I could honestly even see if I'm sure they're going to do those. Like I can't see a future where they won't, but I think that could even almost be like a stopgap before you get those,
Mm,
where they're like,
mm,
here's the new hype
mm.
thing for PlayStation. This is the new way to play. Like, and I think
Yeah.
even them waiting a couple of years is probably a good point too, because then by the time the technology we've had like in the last year or two that's like really amazing and pushed VR even further will be even cheaper for them to produce on like a large
Hmm.
scale.
Hmm.
Because also I believe they still have the best selling VR unit. Like they've still moved the most
I'm sure.
units.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
And
Yeah.
for what it is, I think it's a really good headset, especially for the price. It's just at this point,
Yeah.
it's 5+
It's a
years
great
old.
price.
Like we need like a refresh,
Hmm.
especially with how much advancements have actually been made in that field.
Um, I agree. So we'll turn our attention to Nintendo. Just Nintendo. This is going to be a short one. What do you think of Nintendo's strategy as the PS5 and Xbox launch into the new generation? What are they going to do? Anything differently? How do you think this kind of Nintendo Switch strategy has gone so far? What are your kind of expectations, and what do you think you see Nintendo doing in the next few years?
Yeah, and I think Nintendo's a really interesting person in all this because like as you start kind of getting the
Yeah.
part where like Microsoft is and Sony are now kind of diverging at the fork in the path, Nintendo's been in like a completely different lane this entire time. Like and
Yeah.
I'm glad that the Switch is working out for them, and I figured it would work out much better for them than the Wii U because I was an adamant hater of the Wii U from the announcement that I watched live all the way until it finally died.
It was bad.
It definitely was. I mean, there's like the Virtual Boy, and then there's like the Wii U for like worst consoles they've ever made. Um, and I'm just like, and it did have good games. Like there was some good games there, but I feel like that it even still had like one of the weakest libraries out of their consoles. Um, but that's honestly kind of the unfortunate thing where eventually they hit the point where they just started moving all the games over to what would become Switch games or just porting the library that did make it out over. And so I'm glad to see we're way past that in kind of in where they're at in the generation now. And I'm I think the Switch will continue to keep selling like crazy, like it has been. I honestly don't even know how many hardware revisions we're going to keep getting because like I've been waiting for like a Pro model, which like I don't think apparently is ever going to come out. And honestly though, I wonder what I think going forward from them, because I think what's going to be interesting is that now because of the Switch, they're off cycle with like the other console launches.
Yeah.
And with the Wii U, they
Yeah.
already went a year ahead of time, and that so they already kind of threw themselves out of the whack a little bit. But the Switch launched like midway through this generation, and so when you see
Yeah.
them go into what like is going to be Nintendo's next generation, I can definitely that's just going to happen like midway through this
Hmm.
generation probably. Um, but what I really wonder from them is like I wonder if they are going to make a different console. Like I know this probably sounds like a silly thought, but like the Switch is doing well, and I don't see how they could go back to like a normal set top box type console. And they're not Nintendo. And I'm not even trying to be like mean or like against them, but it's like there's no way they're intuitive enough to do like an X Cloud type thing. Like they're very, for as much new stuff as they do, they're very traditionalist and stuck in like these old ways, and they're very much against like all these online features, and they've gotten so much better about that with the Switch. But it's like from the people I listen to who actively use it, it's still like so much more of a nightmare than like the PS5, the PlayStation would be, or like the Xbox would be, and like their ecosystems. So I don't see them being able to do something like that. So I honestly wonder if they're just going to stick with like this. It's just going to be like a new Switch that is just more powerful. Like not, I don't even necessarily know you call it like a Pro model or what you do it, but I wonder if they're just never going to move away from that concept again, and it's just going to keep getting more powerful. And even though it'll be slightly behind whatever the other consoles are doing, because it's not going to be like a powerhouse, like I think they're always going to have this like portable kind of thing you can pop into the TV and then take away. Like I don't see how they move away from that concept now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting for Nintendo because, for like a million reasons, because they're Nintendo, that just everything's kind of interesting about them. But I am curious what their next step is, right? Like what Nintendo Switch 2, what that is, what that looks like, everything involved with it. Um, because they are like off cycling. Because people have been telling Nintendo to just like stop making consoles and just make their games available to play on everything for at least 2 generations now. But I don't think, Nintendo, they have no real reason to do that now because like the Switch has been very successful. And B, I just don't think that's something Nintendo's ever gonna do, right? Like they are a very proud company. I think like they take it seriously that they are the ones who like saved the video game industry, right? And like the NES is kind of like this like reset point for video games. And so I just don't know if I see them just ever really dropping out of games, especially game console making, especially with how the Switch is doing. Like again, like if they come out with like the Nintendo Switch 2 and it bombs, then yeah, maybe they finally kind of cut the cord. But right now, I can't see them doing any sort of like non-console thing in the future. Like you said, I also just can't find them doing like an iCloud thing because they're not the most intuitive. So yeah, I'm very curious what they do, and also like ultimately Nintendo's just gonna kind of Nintendo. The final question I did want to ask you, Frank, is I want you to put on your predictions hat, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the game in question is after the first year, so year one of the PS5 and Xbox's new console, whose name I can't remember because their consoles are ridiculous and have bonkers names. How many units has each one sold? And as an amendum to that, who is leading the generation kind of conversation and discourse after the first year? Those 2 questions I want answered from you.
Yeah, and like I'm not trying to be biased, but I think even going to 1 year in, I think Sony is going to be probably on top of like the new generation and like console discussion. I they're already at like full speed running with the PS4, and I think they're just going to be able to carry that momentum like forward through the PS5, and I think they have a lot of goodwill that's built up. And it's not even that like Microsoft was able to get rid of a lot of the ill will that was there before, and they've really been able to right that ship, but they're still starting from like a much further back position, even just like in the mentality of so many people. And I think a lot of people, Xbox, there's definitely a big audience there, but a lot of people, I think there's a way bigger like Sony PlayStation fan base that is just really into PlayStation, and Xbox is like a secondary console, or like even one that you're not even going to touch, especially because going back to Game Pass, like I don't ever see myself buying a Series X, or if they come out with Lockhart or like whatever they're doing going forward, I just don't ever see myself picking that up. And kind of goes into, it's not even where it used to be about like, oh, it doesn't really have games I want to play. They're getting to the point where they have games I want to check out, but they're making it so accessible I could just play it on my PC or something else. Like I don't need to get the console to actually like enjoy those experiences. So I don't think they're gonna, like, especially going right out the gate, I don't think they're gonna like be moving a ton of units. So I think Sony is gonna come out on top, at least at the beginning. And honestly, I I think Xbox in the first year is going to struggle to break like 5 million units. I don't like, so I don't think the console itself, I don't think it's going to be like struggling. Like it is going to be a console launch, and it is kind of coming out in a pandemic, which is a little bit weird. But after the first year, I think they're going to struggle to get anywhere near like 5 million. And I think if anything, they might be in like 2 to 3 million range in terms of like units sold. But then the Sony, like the PS5, I think is going to probably break 5 million units. And I think it's probably going to come in closer to like maybe like 7 million, like somewhere between like 5 to 7. Like, I guess it's still going to be what happened this gen. Like, I think if anything, the PS5 is going to outsell the Xbox like 2 to 1.
Who do you think, in terms of like the generational kind of critical reception ever after the first year, is kind of leading the conversation? Like, is it Sony's outselling the Xbox 2-1, but everybody's loving everything that Microsoft and Phil Spencer are doing with Games Pass and whatnot. Is it just a clean sweep by PlayStation? Like, where do you think things in terms of like how people are talking about the consoles after the first year will look like?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be mostly in probably Sony's favor, and I think it is going to be a little bit more split, like 50-50, because I think everything Xbox is doing is very positive, at least what it seems like and what they're going for. And I think that it is going to have a lot of positivity around it in a way that like Xbox and Microsoft haven't had in what feels like a really long time. And but then I think on the other hand, I think Sony is probably going to also have a lot of that like the I think a lot of people are just going to be really hyped about this new awesome fast loading PlayStation that has a couple great exclusives. Like their first year isn't like we're not going to have like a God of War or something that's like crazy amazing, but I think we're getting a lot of amazing things with like Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man, and like it's just a lot of the stuff that like
Mm-hmm.
PlayStation people are going to care about. So I think there's going to be a lot of hype going around about the PS5, and I think that SSD is going to bring a lot of I guess positivity, or like I think that's going to have a lot of I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that they're going to have to like that we can celebrate in terms of like these and crazy fast loading times, and even just jumping through worlds and crazy stuff. And I think it's going to be one of those things where like the PlayStation exclusive play with that the best, and I think that's honestly what everybody's going to be like really stoked about. Like it doesn't even have to be like the most powerful hardware. It doesn't have to be like some crazy new service, or it doesn't have to be some new, I don't want to call it a gimmick, but like the thing with the Switch of like, kind of taking games on the go or kind of like docking it. Like it doesn't have to be something brand new that we've never seen before. We want like, hey, we just want amazing games that look beautiful and run better than they've ever run before. And that's why like I think a lot of us are just going to be hyped on Sony, and what they have to offer. And also kind of this is be next year and kind of looking back, but I think at that point we're even going to be hyped looking forward, because at that point I think we're going to have even more exclusives to look forward, and we might already start getting teases for like a God of War 2.
So, final question. I agree with all everything you said, but final question. Short answer. You're like feel like you're back in grade school again. Give me a short answer here. Are the console wars as we know them over?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think in a critical sense and like an analytical sense, I think it's pretty much put to bed. And the only thing I think that'll keep it going is, sorry, I know you said short answer. I just think there will be like some idiots online trying to like fuel the flames and keep this going. But I think in a
Yeah,
much larger sense, I think this is dead for probably, hopefully forever.
I think it's super exciting in a world where Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony support each other and like give each other shout outs and like are they like tweeting each other about like how great their new games are and everything. And again, they each get to go and do their own thing and nurture their own communities that either want wacky, weird Nintendo shit or want, like a Games Pass, like Netflix style kind of service that Microsoft is offering, or want something like PlayStation offering. Right? I think each one nurturing and building their own ecosystems and doing it in a very different way and showing that in 2020 and going into the future that games can give you multiple different options of how you want to play them and how you want to consume them and how you want to interact with those ecosystems is only to the benefit of everybody and only to the benefit of games as an industry as a whole. Um, with that, Frank, that is the show. Good job. We did it. If you like what you heard, you can go support us over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Like all of our wonderful and amazing patrons have. We love and support all of you. Thank you so much for the support you've given us. It has enabled all of the lights to be stayed on for all these shows and for some new ones to have happened, like this one alongside that D+. So thank you all for that. And again, you can go support us over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite and check out all of the cool rewards, perks, videos, bonus things you get from us for doing that. You can also go rate, review, like, subscribe, and share the show on podcast services around the world. it would really mean the world to us if you could rate us on iTunes and give us 5 stars. It really does help for new shows like this. And it would make me very, very happy. And it would make Frank even happy. He'll personally send you a nice tweet if you give us 5 stars. And screenshot that to us.
You can at me. Everybody has permission to at me if that is the
everyone
case.
At Frank with a nice screenshot of your 5-star review that you wrote for us. We appreciate it very much. You can go find Frank at Irrelevant Jokes on the internet. Frank, anything that you would like to plug or shout out?
Yeah, real quick. I should have given it a shout out last week, but it kind of skipped my mind. But I did another Fireside Chat episode of That Nerdy Site Show with Jazz. It is now a week old at the time you're hearing this, but it's still...
It's very good, though.
Yeah, I thought it was a great episode. We got to catch up about what's been going on in the pandemic and talk about like D&D and some books and stuff like that. I think it's a fun episode that I definitely recommend.
I agree. You can go find me at Lefty Logie on the internet. I will also gladly shout out Frank's and Jazz's conversation from last week's That Nerdy Site episode, because I also agree that it was very good, and I always love a good Fireside Chats episode, sort of like this one, which I think is going to become one of my favorite That Nerdy Site, or whatever this is called, That News You Care About episode so far. Yes, I'll give that a shout out. I also give Trevor a shout out for just continuing the marathon Hamilton D+ shows he is doing. He is, I think, like 5 now. He is just cranking those out all over Hamilton. They're all a lot of fun. That plays real good. And then I'll also, speaking of Jazz, give Jazz a shout out. I don't know if it'll be live by the time you listen to this, but it will be live sometime this week as of recording. She has a written feature. Rank. Oh my god! I'm sorry, Trevor, in advance for the hiccups. She has a written feature about ranking the NHL mascots, and it's very good. It's very funny. It is very kind of classic sports journalism, like tongue in cheek, like it fit on the Ringer. I think it's a blast. Go get angry about her rankings on the internet. And then you can go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site on Twitter, Instagram, and around the internet. Until next time, thank you for playing, and be good to each other.